Moo, 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 moo. Good morning, I'm Sharaad Kuttan and welcome to BFM's Morning Headlines. I want to start with the financial dailies. The Edge Financial Daily as well as the Malaysian Reserve both have stories coming out the Leadership Energy Summit of Asia, and they mention Bank of Negara's governor's position that the increase in electricity tariffs will perhaps nudge inflation up a notch from 2.8 to 3%. Another thing that's interesting to note on the front page of the Edge Financial Daily is this story about the comeback of some tycoon. He might be taking over the National Feedlot Corporation, to which I can only say moo, moo, moo. UMNO dominates the rest of the newspapers with its stories. Here, Kingmakers, we hear you. We have the Prime Minister talking about the importance of new technologies and communicating to the young. Now, some 6 million new voters will come online in 2018 when the next general elections are expected. How to woo them? I don't know. But here he's suggesting that they are in fact the Kingmakers. This is repeated in the other newspapers, but with varying degrees of stridency. Here you have Sinar Harian with the image of the Deputy Prime Minister holding his fist up in the air saying UMNO tidak akan tunduk, which means UMNO will not retreat, it will not bend or bow to anyone in its pursuit of the Malay, Muslim and Bumiputra agendas. Here you have a quote saying, Muhyiddin, the Deputy Prime Minister, beri jaminan tidak kompromi agenda perkasa Islam, Melayu dan Bumiputra. Now, perkasa there is a verb, not a noun, not the name of an organization, but perkasa meaning to empower. Word for today, perkasa. More on utusan of the same. Jaminan UMNO, again the promise to the party faithful and perhaps the nation. UMNO's somewhat schizophrenic approach to governance is both to claim to champion the Malay agenda as well as the national one. How does it do that? Well, if you read the editorial of the New Straits Times today, you get a sense of how they're working this out. Many of you probably don't read editorials from newspapers, but this one makes interesting reading. The first line itself is kind of bewildering. Dominance need not mean either dominating or domineering. So a bit of Jesuitical reasoning there. What the editorial is trying to suggest is that UMNO's dominance is in fact fair and reflects its larger concern. So it might be dominant, but it's not bullying others. Sinar Harian carries a story about electricity tariffs. Remember, Zeti from Bank Negara made the point that it's going to nudge inflation up. They're more concerned about the necessity of this rise. It's considering the other costs that have gone up and its effects on the Malaysian public. On Twitter, there's been some discussion about the effects of electricity tariffs on public transport and the cost of public transport, which means it's going to hit the working class very hard. Now, The Sun reflects the big news of yesterday, which is Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. One small step, yes, but no leap for mankind or the nation. What we see is a marginal improvement, though it's also been noted another country was added to the survey, so that one step up might not mean very much. What is notable is how important these indices are for public perceptions. So public perception versus the actual practice of corruption in the country, the actual incidence of corruption. Now there is a distinction to be made. Now the Star carries the controversy surrounding the Bujang Valley or Lembah Bujang area. This is the Chandi. Here is a reference to an old temple, Hindu-Buddhist temple from the peninsula's pre-Islamic past. It's saying lots of questions to be answered. Now, of course, as I flip through the newspapers, you see the many recurring pictures of flooding, because flooding is a big problem now in the south and to the eastern seaboard of the peninsula. The Malay Mail, again, big story on readiness of our emergency services, because this is a yearly occurrence and you'd expect by now that in fact those SOPs on dealing with flooding is already in place. Some dramatic pictures here. Also, interesting reprimand from the Auditor General's Department about how Selangor and Penang governments underutilize federal funds, and that's a story. Also, there's something that might pique your interest. about a professor who's gotten herself on a blacklist in the US of A, a terror blacklist. She claims that she, of course, shouldn't be there and is fighting it. Lastly, Harian Metro provides us a bit of comic relief. Here you have a story of a woman who couldn't sleep for 3 years. And apparently it has to do with a talisman that was buried in front of our house. Now, what's really troubling about this, of course, is the fact that these stories about black magic are listed under fact. Now, here you have fakta, which means fact in Malay, pengamal perubatan. So that means a medical practitioner, and because if you notice, he's not holding out a stethoscope, he's holding out the palm of his hand. So that kind of medical practitioner, I guess, not to be biased against traditional medicine, if you want to call it that. And also another story about a young woman with a back problem. It used to be the neck, now it's the back. She's kind of craned over. Very sympathetic to pretty young women with problems with their spinal cord. That's all I have for you this morning. I'm Sharaad Kuttan. This has been BFM's Morning Headlines. BFM 89.9.
Can you say yes to corruption?
Say yes to corruption.
Do you actually believe that?
No.
Have you ever bribed a cop?
I bribed my...
No.
But I think in dire circumstances,
Say maybe to corruption. But
Say no. Say no to corruption.
Our special programming in conjunction with the fight against corruption begins on the 2nd and ends on the 9th of December. Catch the people who are making a difference in the fight against corruption on BFM 89.9.